Hey all, I'm Como Gustafson and I'm running for the board of directors of the Oregon Country Fair. I ran last year and some of you may remember that. Um, Coming out of last year, I had fully intended on running for the board again this year, but as the year progressed, um, my intentions to move down to Eugene had been delayed, and most of my time and energy was focused on building my company, Cascadia Hemp Tech. Um, that being said, as the year progressed, I had leaned further and further away from possibly running for the board. But as we got closer to this year's election cycle, I had been approached by numerous people uh, and asked if I would really consider running again. Um, this gave me the encouragement to go ahead and decide that, yeah, I am going to run. So here I am. Um, Things have been pretty bad for us lately. And I say that with an extremely heavy heart. Um, People that I've known for decades are ripping each other's throats out over fears that everyone has it out for each other, um, and it's I'm sorry, talking about this makes it really easy for my thought patterns and thought processes to be derailed because it really does hurt to see where we are. Anyhow, I think that a large contributing factor to a lot of the problems we're having right now are those many years that key figures who have been a part of our organization for so long um, have a lot of bad history with other folks in the same boat. And um, being somebody who's newer to the scene, um, I think that it benefits me because I don't have all these years of bad history with anybody that I would be running or working on the board with if I were to win this election. Um, that makes me a very easy person to work with. Um, so I've been involved with FAIR for about 25 years, and um, all my years of involvement with the fair, I've worked with pre-post security, and for the last 5-6 years, I've been co-crew lead of Early Late Crew, which is an extension of pre-post security, a crew that was eventually formed through my efforts in working with QM for a number of years, pre-fair and mostly post-fair. All my years of involvement with the fair leading up to that period of time, I had always kind of been encased in my bubble of pre-post security. I didn't know a whole lot of people outside of pre-post. There were some here and there that I had gotten to know over the years, but not very many outside of pre-post. My involvement with other folks on site pre and post fair gave me a broader perspective on a lot of the issues that we're facing today. And it is a big part of what has motivated me to want to run for the board, because I believe I have a pretty good grasp of a lot of the issues that we're facing and needing to deal with. Um, so from there, I will go into stating that I do not have any prior experience on the board of directors for a nonprofit, and I'm probably the only candidate running who is in that position. Fortunately, um, regardless who ends up getting elected along with me, if I do get elected, um, pretty much everybody running for the board right now has had experience on the board for the Oregon Country Fair or on boards for other nonprofits. So I would be surrounded by individuals who would be able to help walk me through the process of learning the new job. Um, I do sit on a professional board or the equivalent of a professional board. My company, Cascadia Hemp Tech, is currently an LLC, but we have structured our company so that it models a corporate model with a board of directors and officers. because we will be transitioning into a Class B Corp when we incorporate a few months around the corner from now. So that does require all the fiduciary responsibilities of a board. We kind of deal with both operational and governance, in the sense that there's the day-to-day operations of the company that we have to oversee. But in addition to that, we have all the policies, company policies that we've been developing, and the procedures to implement those policies. Much similar to what I would be doing on the governance board for the Oregon Country Fair. I have not sat on any of the committees or participated in any of the committees for the Oregon Country Fair. Once again, not living in the Eugene area makes that very difficult to be able to get down here to participate in those. Although there are a couple of areas that are very passionate to me, and when I'm able to, I will be participating in a lot of these, or in some of the committees. Two that stand out to me and greatly are working with committees that deal with sustainability, and the diversity committee is a really big one for me too. So whether or not I am elected onto the board, when I do relocate down to Eugene here real shortly, I will be getting more involved in those areas. Outside of the fair, I have served on committees with other nonprofits. One example would be I sat on the education committee for the Straub Environmental Center, now known as Straub Outdoors. On that committee, we developed all of the nature-based educational programs for the organization. So I do understand how a committee interacts with and works with a board of directors. I do understand that there is a pretty steep learning curve associated with this. I look forward to the opportunity of that learning process. And I'm up to the task. So all of that being said, I do have skill sets that make me a benefit that I can bring to the table. I have a lot of leadership experience. Pretty much my entire life, I've kind of always fell right into a leadership role, regardless of what it was I was dealing with or involved with. In my leadership trainings go all the way back to my youth with my involvement in the scouting program, where I pretty much always had a leadership role or leadership position. I made it through that program all the way up to the rank of Eagle Scout. Nearly every single job I've ever worked, I've worked my way up to a management position, and in most cases it was a pretty rapid process where I was moved up. In my years of fighting wildfire, within my first season of being out on the job, I was moved up and trained to be a squad boss. And just a short few years in, I was already on my way to being trained as a crew boss. At Country Fair, after a few years of being on crew, I was moved up as an operational shift supervisor. And, that is a job I held for quite a few years, about 10 at least. And then went on from there to working on what I did that eventually led to the creation of Early Late Crew, where I'm now co-crew leader. And in that crew, I mostly oversee a lot of the operational aspects of the crew. I also have risk assessment experience, especially when it comes to my history of fighting fire and being out on the fire line. It is considered to be one of the most dangerous professions or fields in the world. And every single time I would be out on that fire line, I would have anywhere from 5 to 20 people's lives in my hand, where the insurance that those lives would continue were based off of my abilities to assess risk. And as a parent as well, anybody who's a parent out there knows and understands that there is a heck of a lot of risk assessment associated with raising a child. So, that being said, moving on to some of the issues that I believe that we need to deal with. I think that our membership application process and our voting process needs to be completely overhauled. It's the 21st century. There's no reason why we shouldn't be having an online registration process and an online voting process. Um, and these are things that we need to focus on immediately, in my opinion, especially if we're going to really start working on the issues that we need to work on in order to move forward into the next 50 years. Um, Another big issue is that there's the perception amongst a lot of the membership that the membership doesn't really get listened to. They don't really have the opportunity to be listened to. And the way our system is established, it continuously leads to scenarios where a large number of people show up to voice their concerns in the very last moments before decisions are made, and usually against a lot of the people who are showing up, as far as like against the way those showing up view things. Um, and that's not a healthy situation. There's always been a lot of talk about work sessions. I think it's time to start walking our talk and actually hold the working sessions instead of just talking about them. And I appreciate and thank Lily so much for stepping up to the plate and actually doing what's necessary to ensure that those start happening. I look forward to being able to take part in those. And I hope as many of you as possible do as well, because that's one major way that we can increase our voice as a membership and become more involved in the issues that we're dealing with the fair during this time of change that we're experiencing. So, um, volunteer resources. That's another really big one. Um, there seems to be a sense that the volunteers don't matter very much when it comes to the end game. Um, this is evident in inadequate resources being applied for volunteers in the areas of porta potties, hand washing stations, things that are super critical, especially when year after year we have outbreaks of disease and people end up going to the hospital. These are things that can be prevented if we have proper hygiene in place, and just by spending a few bucks more every year, we can eradicate that problem and provide the resources that the volunteers need while they're there. Um, the NAO report. The NAO report needs to be scrutinized and looked at with a, a microscope, and we have to really decide which of these suggestions or recommendations made by the NAO report are going to be the most effective ones to implement. Um, as we go through that process, we need to write the policies and the procedures to implement those policies before we even think about implementing them. Um, we can't just be going through this and picking and choosing what seems to be convenient at the time. We need to deal with the whole entire thing. And as I had stated previously at a town hall event, in the world of business, you don't initiate until you have a solid blueprint in place, so you know the path that you need to take to get to your end result. Um, we need to, speaking of policies and procedures, our grievance policy, um, they might as well not really even be there by the way it seems. It's a broken system. People's grievances aren't being dealt with. They're not being dealt with efficiently and in a timely manner and in a fair manner. Um, this isn't good. This isn't acceptable. Our code of conduct. It blows my mind that we currently have a board of directors who the majority of the board decided to vote against creating a committee to review our code of conduct. So many of the issues we're facing right now are a result of not having a code of conduct policy in place. And we need to focus on the things that are going to help solve the problems that have gotten us to where we are. This is a major one. We need a personnel committee or personnel policy committee that consists of people who have years of HR experience, first and foremost. It would also be nice to have an actual paid HR staff person as a part of that as well. Not just for the policy personnel committee or the personnel committee, but just in general. We need to have somebody who knows what they're doing, reviewing all of our HR issues. I do support the CRG. or at least what myself and many others interpret to be, which is a resource group that is there for coordinators and for their crews and volunteers to be able to have an equal voice at the table. Um, and I hope that in a timely manner we can get through the process of finalizing the resource group, so we can turn to the next step and start focusing on the creation of resource groups for other areas of the fair, whether it be food booths or artisans and vendors, entertainers. I think that these are very important, and it's a way for another way for checks and balances to be in place when it comes to issues that um, deal with coordinators and their volunteers. So to close this out, I mean, this is going on 16 minutes now already. Um, I would like to close with the fact that I have a rich history of being able to build bridges, bring people to the table, and get things done that would normally be shied away from. A good example of that, Salem, Oregon, many years ago, close to 20 years ago now, or more, we got a skate park put in. And I used to be associated with a group called Youth Speak, which was a forum that was created for the youth of Salem to be able to have a voice when it came to issues that affected them. And there was a really big issue with the youth being in the downtown area and not having a place to go and a place to hang out. And through this forum, I brought up the idea of, oh, hey, let's create a skate park, a place in the downtown area that would attract kids to that area, and away from the area of commerce. And when I brought that up, the response was, well, we've already tried that before. And I was like, well, then why don't? As a matter of fact, we've tried it twice. And I was like, well, why don't we try again? And they were like, well, we don't really have anybody to head it up. And I was like, hey, I'll do that. And sure enough, after multiple attempts of pulling it off, we just took a different approach and managed to get it accomplished. So that's just one example of many. But a dear friend of mine likes to describe me as one who brings heart. And for a long time, I've always heard her say this and always wondered exactly what she meant by that. And she eventually wrote up this little piece that explained in detail what she meant by how I bring heart to a situation. And I will, with her permission, I'll post that so everybody actually has an opportunity to see what she refers to when I bring heart. It was humbling, to say the least. So with that, I hope that I have your support, and I hope I can get your vote, and I hope that whoever it is that wins this election, hopefully and preferably with myself, we will have it in us to do what we need to do to right our ship, get it back up on an even keel, and moving in the right direction. We need to go through this period of change in a slow and cautious way where the membership can continuously be informed about what we're doing as we go through those processes and how they're going to be affected by those processes. And they have to be given the opportunity to speak their voice while we're going through these processes and actually be heard. I hope to be able to be a part of that. So anyhow, over the next week or two, I'll come up with a couple more videos on honing in on a couple of specific issues. Until then, I love you all, and I hope I have your support. Thank you. Go for Como.